Thank you, Rhino. Joining us now in the studio, Mississippi's Attorney General, Lynn Fitch. Good afternoon, General. Thanks so much for coming in. Always good to see you.
Good afternoon. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me today.
You got it. So you guys are busy. You got a lot on the plate. Let's talk first about the abortion case, the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, scheduled to be heard by the Supreme Court. Coming up in December, right?
December the 1st. We're 2 weeks out.
December 1st.
We're excited that it's almost here. And, you know, this is such a monumental case, Gerard. It's going to not only impact our state, impact our country.
Yeah.
It's very critical to how different states react and how we, again, look at the issues. Because certainly there's nothing in the Constitution, there's no history, no text, no script, part of that says abortion is given right by the Constitution. Yeah. So what we have to do, and what our argument is, you have to treat it like other issues that are applicable to states. So you apply the rational basis review by the courts. And just sort of explaining that, it's two questions. Does the state have a legitimate interest? And secondly, is the law rationally related to that, meeting that interest? Well, if you think about it, for 50 years, there's been a detour. The United States Supreme Court didn't apply this rational basis test. They've had their own special set of rules that applied to abortion only. Whereas this is just truly a rule of law case. When you strip away all that political noise and everything, it's basically a question for each state. That's not happened over the last 50 years. You have had, every different court, which, as a reminder, are all unelected folks. Yeah. And they've been making these decisions when, in fact, it should be held, the accountability to each state to determine what their laws should say. And that goes back to your legislators that you elect, your governors that you elect. And they're the voice, they're the ones that are the policymakers that we have all elected to serve in that capacity.
So what is the government's case here? I mean, what will they argue?
Well, again, we make the argument that the role of the Constitution gives it to the people. For us. They're going to say that Roe v. Wade is the precedent, that's what you have to stay with. That is, they're going to make that argument that it is given rights through the Constitution to have the abortion right. We're certainly going to make the difference in that regard. And the other part of that is what's happened in 50 years? Let's talk about the role of women in 50 years. In 50 years, we've had, the 1993, you had the medical, the maternity, paternity leave was installed.
Right.
You've had women, careers have changed. You look at the, even in the last couple of years, things have changed where you can remotely work, or you've got flexible schedules, or consultants, or things where mothers can do both. You don't have to be pitted one against the other. You can successfully have a career and you can successfully raise a family. And I think that's so key to where we are 50 years later, to have that discussion and the empowerment of women, and then certainly saving and protecting the sanctity of life. And if you look even certainly at the technology, look at the medical advancements, what we know now that we didn't know 50 years ago.
Right.
So,
no question. So, all right. So, General, is there a technical aspect of this case as well with respect to human viability of a fetus?
So our case, based on our laws, 15-week abortion ban.
Yep.
So we are going to make the argument that is exactly where it should be. Our legislators, our governor, opted to make that decision on behalf of the state of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. I think when you see in a post-Roe v. Wade world, you're going to see different states react differently. States should have their own accountability laws, their own accountability of their legislators, their governors. I think you'll see an array. I think you certainly will see in the red states very conservative laws governing abortion, but I think it'll be very different. But I think for the first time, you're not going to pit, a woman against a woman. You're not going to pit women against the children and having to make those choices, and know that now for the first time in 50 years, they are absolutely empowered to do both.
Yeah. All right, so explain the relevance of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the parties in the case. How did that evolve?
Well, Dr. Dobbs
Sure.
is certainly our chief health officer for the state and has done a tremendous job. But he was the lucky draw. He's the first named plaintiff, and so he's now become it's become the Dobbs case.
Okay.
And then the health organization is the abortion provider here in the state of Mississippi. And as we got into this case, and we had the opportunity certainly to be selected to make the argument on behalf of our state, which affects so many others, we had 76 amicus briefs filed in support of what we anticipate doing, which is basically saying it's time to overturn Roe v. Wade. It is time to make a difference, to change the trajectory of history involving women, how we empower women, and I mean all women, because you think about it, women have been affected, and they've had to make a choice, and that was their only choice. Here, all women together can decide that you can have a family, you can have a career, but we should be empowering the women of color, the women who don't have, jobs or need new skill sets. We now need to look at it from a holistic perspective and empower and think about those babies we're saving, and also think about how we're empowering those women in their next step as they raise those babies. And that's important, too. And the other piece of that is we need to look at some very strong legislation on making fathers accountable. Certainly the mothers should be able to know that the fathers are going to be financially supporting these children through their their financial steps until they mature. It shouldn't all be, set at the feet of the mother. Yeah. But for us, we can all now have this real dialogue and this true conversation about how we help mothers, how we help women when they're pregnant, how we help them as they become mothers, and then how do we empower them as they move through life as they raise these children.
Yeah, and you're so right. I think, General, about the situation with the fathers, because you're aware that Mississippi does not do very well in that category in terms of the fatherless homes in our state. And statistics for years have shown that, and these are irrefutable statistics, this is data that has been widely analyzed and collected and reported, that children who come from these environments typically have a harder time in life and become more of a burden on society. And we're letting the fathers get away and not holding them responsible whatsoever. Certainly agree it takes two to tango, but fathers got to bear that responsibility. Many of them are just missing in action.
Yeah, and it's such a disservice to the children, and it's a disservice to those mothers when they're not being equally supportive as far as financially and helping raise these children as well. And you're right, the statistics show that sometimes they now get caught up in that same cycle when, in fact, now we can have that conversation, take some action, and maybe make a change. I mean, that's a huge cultural change to be able to do that and know that we're helping those children, we're helping those mothers, the fathers be involved. I mean, it's just a win on so many levels.
So what happens here, General, if you prevail in the case? Does this strike down and reverse Roe v. Wade? Is that what would be the effect? And then what would Mississippi then do after that, in the aftermath?
Absolutely. If they rule in our favor, then certainly that means that our law is upheld.
Okay.
So that will be the law of the land for the state of Mississippi. Then any other state then can move and change their laws, or the ones that they have in place would be upheld, because, again, you're giving the rule of law back to the states, back to your lawmakers. And they're hard decisions. We all know that. But, again, we've elected these individuals to serve and to act as our policymaking decision makers on our behalf. And so you'll see a lot of different states will do different things, but yes, it would put our 15-week abortion ban in place.
I know we've talked about it before. This is a 10th Amendment federalism case as much as it is anything.
Right. Well, and the question here is viability. And, when we got the opportunity to rise to the call and answer the question, we did. We talked about the women in our brief. We talked about the sanctity of life. We also talked about protecting the medical profession. Yeah. And, again, this is the first time we could have a clear conversation to the justices that it's 50 years, and look at all the different factors that have changed, and it's time to overturn. It's time to allow us as individuals in our states collectively through our legislators to make a decision in how we want to be supportive for these women and children. Yeah.
All right. Vaccine mandates. We got a few minutes left here. Yeah. Tell us where we are on that. Some news popping. I know you got to go, right?
Oh, yeah, but this is a good topic we need to talk about.
Here we go.
So, vaccine mandates, we're moving on all three levels. The president and his administration overreaching totally.
Yeah.
We are fighting back. I have sued with my colleagues on all three levels. We've gotten a stay in the Fifth Circuit, and I will continue to fight because you shouldn't have to choose on your religious liberties, on your job, based on vaccination. And they have definitely gone the wrong way and tried to shoehorn mandates on all of us. So I will continue that fight on behalf of all Mississippians.
Mississippi's Attorney General Lynn Fitch fighting for Mississippians. Appreciate you coming on. Always good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you.
We'll be back with more talk here on